United States, 1852. Slavery is not only well established, it is the backbone of the Southern economy. 3.2 million enslaved people, and that number is only going up. Tensions are high. The North and South are on opposite sides of the slavery debate, and everyone is waiting for the entire thing to explode. Then, this book drops. But it's not just any book. It's the best-selling novel of the entire 19th century. The only book that outsold it was the Bible. Everyone was talking about it. It was Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, and it was about to change everything. The legend goes that when Abraham Lincoln met Stowe in 1862, he said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." That's how powerful it was. It shaped public opinion. It sparked the Civil War. But how did this book gain so much influence? Did it really spark the Civil War? And why is its legacy so complicated that even today people still use Uncle Tom as an insult? This is the story of the immense power of books and how one book changed America forever. Okay, let's rewind a bit. It's 1850. The North and the South are deeply divided. In the North, people opposed slavery, but passively. They weren't actively fighting to end it, and some even benefited from the system. In the South, however, people defended slavery, not just as necessary, but as a positive good. They claimed that enslaved people were better off under their masters, who provided them with food and shelter and a better life than they could ever achieve on their own. It wasn't just about economics, it was also about ideology. And Harriet Beecher Stowe was in the perfect position to see both sides of this divide. See this river? This is the Ohio River, and it basically separated the North from the South. On one side of the river, there was slavery. On the other, freedom. And Cincinnati, right here, is where Harriet Beecher Stowe lived. She saw the brutal reality of slavery firsthand. She saw people ripped from their families at slave auctions, but she also saw people gain freedom. She talked to free Black people. She talked to escaped slaves. Once they made it across this river, they were free. Until the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This act basically said, by law, slaves must be returned to their owners even if they are in a free state. It forced all Northerners to help return and capture slaves. All of a sudden, all those people who said they weren't involved, they were complicit. For Harriet Beecher Stowe, this act was the breaking point. Just 1 year earlier, in 1849, she had lost her own son to cholera. And through her grief, she had gained deep empathy for enslaved mothers who had their children ripped apart from them. That personal loss, combined with everything that she'd witnessed in Cincinnati, ignited something in her. She felt compelled to act. But how do you make an entire nation care? How do you turn abolitionist ideas from a fringe movement into mainstream conversation? Stowe's answer: a book. A book that would make people feel the horrors of slavery. This novel, spoiler alert, tells the story of a Black slave named Tom. He's a devout Christian with a good heart. He endures the brutality of slavery but remains noble and refuses to betray others. At the climax of the novel, 2 enslaved women escape after being sexually assaulted. Tom knows where they're hiding, but when his master demands to know, Tom refuses to tell him. He knows he will be beaten to death, but he refuses anyways, choosing to die rather than betray his fellow slaves. This was revolutionary. Uncle Tom's Cabin humanized slaves in a way that pamphlets and statistics never could. It's one thing to be told that slavery is wrong and people are being mistreated. It's entirely another to live a 600-page novel of one man's suffering. It made slavery personal, and people paid attention. The book exploded. That first year, it sold 300,000 copies in the United States. 8 printing presses worked 24 hours a day and could barely keep up. No one had seen anything like this in literature before, so it's commonly called the first bestseller. It wasn't just dinner table conversation, it was national conversation. The effects were immediate. In the North, it radicalized people, turning passive opponents of slavery into activists. It fueled the abolitionist movement and intensified the political divide. But in the South, it sparked outrage. They condemned Beecher Stowe, called her a liar, banned the book. In response, over 25 pro-slavery, anti-Tom novels were written, many by Southern women. They portrayed enslavers as noble caretakers and enslaved people as childlike dependents who needed them. They presented antebellum South as a peaceful, orderly society being maliciously attacked by Northern propaganda. All this only deepened the divide between the North and the South, pushing the country closer to war. By the time Lincoln was elected in 1860, Uncle Tom's Cabin had done its work, shifting public opinion and setting the stage for his victory. So, Did it actually start the Civil War? Well, it would be incredibly reductive to say that any one thing started the Civil War, but this book certainly brought the war years closer. So with all this influence, shouldn't Uncle Tom have gone down as a hero? Well, it's complicated. I'm sure you've heard Uncle Tom used many times today as an insult.
When we talk about a person of color that goes back historically to the days of slavery and that person betraying his own community, we have a term in the black community. That term that we used is called Uncle Tom.
It's a term now used to describe an overly submissive black person who is trying to gain favor with white people. But how did that happen? We just learned that Uncle Tom was a noble hero who gave his life to save others. Well, after the war, these things called Tom shows became super popular. They were stage plays based on the book. But here's the problem. There weren't any copyright laws, meaning they could rewrite the story. And they did. There was nothing Beecher Stowe could do to stop it. These shows were often performed in blackface and totally changed Uncle Tom into a caricature. Remember the climax of the book? Tom refuses to tell his master where the two women are, knowing he will die for it. An act of bravery. But many stage shows didn't like this dark depiction of slavery, so they took out the scene and instead showed a happy, submissive slave dancing around, reinforcing stereotypes rather than challenging them. One estimate says that at least 3 million people saw these plays, far more than read the book. The original character Tom was diluted until he was just a sellout for white people. And this version of Tom is the one that seeped over into popular culture and gave rise to the modern insult. But book Uncle Tom should be remembered as a strong, heroic character who refused to betray his family and friends. Even beyond this misrepresentation though, Uncle Tom's Cabin isn't without flaws. It's written in a sentimental style which was really popular in the 1800s. It was specifically designed to evoke emotions, but today that often feels overly dramatic. Even at the time, critics questioned Stowe's understanding of the South, forcing her to publish a key to Uncle Tom's Cabin to defend her research. The novel also relies on racial stereotypes, further complicating its legacy. James Baldwin said Beecher Stowe was not so much a novelist as an impassioned pamphleteer. And he had a point. It is most often studied as a piece of history and not a work of literature. But it's a really important piece of history. It's a book that sparked a war, fueled a movement, and most importantly, it's a testament to the power of books to change hearts, minds, and the course of history.